Daeho Kim stared at the empty bed across from his and wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. 3 days ago, his old roommate Jaewook had moved out to live with his girlfriend. Now Daeho was waiting for his new roommate to arrive. Not just any roommate, but an alien roommate. The interspecies cultural exchange program at Seoul Galactic University was supposed to be exciting. Students from different planets living together, learning about each other's cultures, building bridges across the stars. At least that's what the brochure said. Daeho had signed up because he was studying xenobiology and thought it would help his grades. Now he was starting to think he should have just gotten a human roommate like everyone else. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Daeho opened it to find a tall, thin figure standing in the hallway. She had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. Silver markings ran along her arms and neck in patterns that looked like flowing water. Her hair was white as snow and cut short. Her eyes were large and dark, almost black. "I am Nira," she said in careful, precise Korean. Her voice was quiet and formal. "I believe I am assigned to this room." Yes, come in," Daeho said, stepping aside. He tried to smile but felt awkward. "I'm Daeho. Welcome to Earth." Nira walked into the room carrying only a small bag. She looked around carefully, studying every corner, every window, every piece of furniture. Her silver markings seemed to pulse faintly as she examined everything. "That bed is yours," Daeho said, pointing to the empty one. "The bathroom is shared. There's a small kitchen area over there. The Wi-Fi password is written on that paper on your desk." Nira nodded and set her bag on the bed. She unpacked quickly and efficiently. A few clothes, some books, a small device that Daeho didn't recognize. Everything had its place. When she was done, her side of the room looked almost military in its neatness. "Are you hungry?" Daeho asked. "There's a good noodle place nearby. We could get dinner and talk." "Thank you, but no," Nira said. "I have already eaten." Daeho tried again. "Maybe tomorrow then? I could show you around campus. That is not necessary. I have maps," and that was how it started. Nira was polite but distant. She answered questions with short, careful responses. She never asked questions of her own. She kept to her side of the room and seemed to prefer it when Daeho wasn't there. Over the next few weeks, Daeho learned very little about his alien roommate. Nira was studying literature, she said. She was from a planet called Velthara. Her people were peaceful and loved learning. She had come to Earth to study human stories and poems. But there were strange things about Nira that didn't match what she said. She woke up at exactly 5 in the morning every day and did what looked like military exercises. When Daeho asked about it, she said it was Velthari morning meditation. She ate the same foods every day at the same times. She went to bed at exactly 10 at night. Nira never seemed to relax. Even when she was reading or studying, she sat straight and alert. Her large dark eyes were always watching, always aware of everything around her. When someone knocked on the door, she would tense up until she knew who it was. When Daeho moved too quickly or made sudden noises, her silver markings would brighten and she would turn toward him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "She's weird," said Somin Park, Daeho's study partner and best friend. They were sitting in the cafeteria, and Nira was at a table by herself reading while she ate. "I've never seen an alien who seems so nervous." "Maybe that's just how Velthari are," Daeho said, but he didn't really believe it. He had looked up information about Velthari culture online. They were supposed to be friendly and social. They lived in large family groups and loved to share stories and songs. Nira didn't seem like that at all. "Have you seen her talk to any other students?" Somin asked. Daeho thought about it. "No, actually. She goes to classes, but I've never seen her with classmates. She doesn't join study groups. She turned down 3 different invitations to parties." "That's not normal," Somin said, "even for an alien." The first really strange thing happened during a fire drill. Daeho was half asleep when the alarm went off. He stumbled around looking for his shoes and trying to remember where the emergency exits were. Most of the other students were doing the same thing, confused and slow, but not Nira. She was dressed and ready to go in seconds. She moved toward the exit with quick, precise steps. She seemed to know exactly where to go and how to get there fast. When they reached the meeting point outside, Daeho saw her scanning the area like she was looking for threats. Her silver markings were bright and pulsing rapidly. "Good reflexes," Daeho said when they were allowed back inside. Nira's markings dimmed immediately. "Velthari schools practice emergency procedures frequently," she said. "Safety is important, but it was more than good reflexes." Nira had moved like someone with military training. like someone who had been in real emergencies before. The second strange thing was her books. Daeho had noticed that Nira always carried her bag with her and never left her books lying around. One day she forgot to zip the bag closed when she left for class. Daeho could see inside. There were literature books, as she had said, but there were also technical manuals about spacecraft systems and weapons technology. There was a book about military strategy. There was another book with symbols on the cover that Daeho didn't recognize, but the pictures inside looked like star maps and battle formations. When Nira came back, she saw that her bag was open. Her silver markings flared bright, and she looked at Daeho with an expression he had never seen before. For just a moment, she looked dangerous. "I'm sorry," Daeho said quickly. "I didn't mean to look. The bag was open and I just saw—" "It's fine," Nira said, but her voice was different, colder. She zipped the bag closed and put it away carefully. That night, Daeho couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the books, about the way Nira had looked at him, about all the small strange things he had noticed. Something wasn't right about his alien roommate. She wasn't just shy or different. She was hiding something. He decided he needed to find out what. Daeho started paying closer attention to Nira after the incident with the bag. What he discovered made him more confused than ever. Every morning at exactly 5:15 after her exercises, Nira would stand by the window for 10 minutes. She would scan the courtyard below like she was watching for something specific. When Daeho asked about it, she said she enjoyed watching the sunrise. But her eyes weren't looking at the sky. They were checking every entrance to their building, every path between the dormitories, every place where someone could hide. Nira received messages on a small device that she kept with her always. The device didn't look like any phone or tablet Daeho had ever seen. It was thin and dark, and when messages came, it would pulse with a soft blue light. The messages always made Nira tense. Her silver markings would brighten and her hands would shake slightly as she read them. She would delete each message immediately after reading it. "Family news?" Daeho asked once when he saw her reading a message. "Yes," Nira said. But she didn't look at him when she answered. 3 months into living together, Daeho's laptop broke. The screen went black and nothing he tried would fix it. He had important assignments due and was starting to panic. "May I look at it?" Nira asked quietly. Daeho handed over the laptop, expecting her to suggest taking it to the repair shop. Instead, Nira pulled a small tool from her bag. It looked like nothing Daeho had ever seen. Part screwdriver, part computer chip, part something else entirely. She opened the laptop and worked on it for exactly 12 minutes. When she was done, it worked perfectly. "How did you do that?" Daeho asked, amazed. "Velthari are good with technology," Nira said, putting the strange tool away quickly. But when Daeho looked up Velthari technology online, he found information about their art and literature and philosophy, nothing about advanced repair tools, nothing about the kind of technology Nira had just used. So Min started visiting their room more often to study. She was curious about Nira and kept trying to include her in conversations. Nira was always polite but never really engaged. She would answer direct questions but never volunteered information about herself. "What's your favorite thing about Earth so far?" So-min asked one evening while they were all studying. "The libraries are well organized," Nira replied without looking up from her book. "What about the food? Have you tried Korean barbecue?" "I prefer simple meals. What about music, movies? Do you miss entertainment from your home planet?" Nira's silver markings pulsed once. "I do not have much experience with entertainment." So Min gave Daeho a look that said, "This is not normal." Even for an alien exchange student, Nira's answers were strange. She talked like someone who had never had time for fun or relaxation. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night. Daeho and So-min were studying for their xenobiology exam at the small table in the room. Nira was at her desk reading. The atmosphere was quiet and peaceful. So-min reached for her water bottle and accidentally knocked over the desk lamp. It fell to the floor with a loud crash, the bulb shattering. What happened next changed everything. Nira moved faster than Daeho thought was possible. One moment she was sitting at her desk. The next, she was standing between him and So-min and the source of the noise. Her silver markings blazed bright white, almost painful to look at. Her whole body was tense and ready to fight. Her hands were positioned like she was holding weapons even though she had none. "Contact report." she said in a sharp, commanding voice that was completely different from her usual quiet tone. Threat assessment in progress. Daeho and So-min stared at her in shock. This was not the shy literature student they knew. This was someone trained for combat, someone who had been in real danger before. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Nira seemed to realize what had happened. Her markings dimmed quickly and she stepped back, looking embarrassed and frightened. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice small again. The noise startled me. Nira, Daeho said carefully, what just happened? Nothing. I don't like sudden loud noises, but it wasn't nothing. Daeho had seen military training videos. He knew what combat reflexes looked like. Nira had moved and reacted like a soldier. So-min was still staring. That was incredible, she said. How did you move so fast? I should clean up this glass, Nira said, not answering the question. Her hands were shaking as she gathered the pieces of the broken bulb. After So-min left, Daeho tried to talk to Nira about what had happened. She insisted it was nothing, just nervousness. But she wouldn't meet his eyes, and her silver markings kept flickering nervously. That night, Daeho couldn't sleep. He waited until he was sure Nira was asleep, then quietly got up and went to the computer lab. He spent hours researching everything he could find about Velthari culture, history, and the exchange program. What he found made him even more suspicious. According to the university records, Nira was from a city called Velthara Prime. But when Daeho looked up that city, he couldn't find it anywhere. It wasn't on any official Velthari maps or in any cultural databases. The Velthari government website listed all their current cultural exchange students. Nira's name wasn't on the list. Most disturbing of all, when Daeho dug deeper into recent Velthari history, he found gaps. Big gaps. The official records talked about their peaceful culture and love of learning. But there were references to something called the War Period that had ended about 20 years ago. Details about this war were scarce and often contradictory. The next day, Daeho decided to confront Nira directly but gently. He waited until they were alone in the room. Nira, he said, can you tell me about your family? Her silver markings dimmed immediately. What do you want to know? Are they still on Velthara? Do you miss them? For a long moment, Nira didn't answer. She stared out the window with an expression Daeho had never seen before. Sad and empty and far away. They're gone, she said finally. Gone? You mean they moved somewhere else? No. Her voice was barely a whisper. They're dead. Daeho felt a chill run down his spine. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Was it an accident? Nira turned to look at him then, and her dark eyes were full of pain and something else. Something that looked like guilt. No, she said. It wasn't an accident. Before Daeho could ask what she meant, Nira got up and left the room. She didn't come back until very late that night, and she went straight to bed without saying anything. But Daeho had heard enough. Combined with everything else he had observed, Nira's words painted a picture that frightened him. His quiet, shy roommate was hiding something big. Something connected to violence and death and a war that the Velthari government didn't want people to know about. He decided he needed to find out the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. For 2 weeks after their conversation about Nira's family, things went back to normal. Or at least they seemed normal on the surface. Nira returned to her quiet routine, but Daeho noticed she was more careful now. She watched him more closely, as if trying to figure out how much he suspected. Daeho continued his research in secret. He found old news reports about conflicts in the Velthari system, but most of the details were blocked or deleted. What he could find painted a picture of a species that hadn't always been peaceful scholars. There were references to military campaigns, to weapons development, to something called the Deep Strike Battalions. He also started noticing more strange things about Nira. She received more messages on her mysterious device, and each one made her more nervous. She began checking the locks on their door multiple times each night. She would stand by the window longer in the mornings, and her silver markings would pulse with what looked like anxiety. One evening, Daeho was making dinner when he decided to try a different approach. Instead of asking direct questions, he would share something personal and see if Nira would do the same. My grandfather was in the Korean War, he said while stirring noodles. He never talked about it much, but sometimes he would have nightmares. My grandmother said the war changed him. Nira looked up from her book. Her silver markings flickered. War changes everyone, she said quietly. Did your people fight in wars? Once. The word came out like a painful admission. What happened? Nira was quiet for so long that Deho thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. We lost everything. Before Deho could ask more questions, Nira closed her book and went to her side of the room. The conversation was over. 3 days later, everything changed. Deho was in the kitchen making ramyun for dinner when he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. It was a low mechanical humming coming from outside their window. He looked out and saw nothing, but the sound was getting closer. Then the door burst open. Nira stumbled inside, bleeding from a cut on her left arm. Her silver markings were blazing so brightly they hurt to look at. Her clothes were torn and dirty. She looked like she had been running. "We need to leave," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "Right now." "Nira, what happened?" "You're hurt. There's no time." She was already moving, grabbing essential items and stuffing them into her bag. "They found me." "Who found you?" Nira stopped and looked at him. Her dark eyes were filled with fear and something else. "Decision. I lied to you," she said, "about everything." "What do you mean?" "My name is Nira Velthes. I'm not a student. I'm not here to study literature." She pulled out a first aid kit and began treating her wound with practiced efficiency. "I'm a war criminal." Deho felt the world shift around him. "What?" 20 years ago, my people fought a war against the hegemony empire. It was brutal. Billions died on both sides. Her hands were steady as she cleaned and bandaged her arm, but her voice shook. "I was a commander in the 47th Deep Strike Battalion. We specialized in covert operations behind enemy lines." The mechanical humming sound was getting louder. Nira moved to the window and carefully looked out. "The Velthari weren't always peaceful," she continued, still watching outside. "We were warriors, some of the best the galaxy had ever seen. When the hegemony threatened our colonies, we fought back with everything we had." "But you're so young," Deho said, trying to process what she was telling him. "I was 17 when the war started, 22 when it ended." Nira turned away from the window. "I was very good at what I did." "Too good." The humming sound stopped. In the sudden silence, Deho could hear his own heartbeat. "What happened to your people?" he asked. "We won the war," Nira said bitterly. "But the cost was too high. The hegemony retaliated by destroying our homeworld. Velthara was turned to glass and ash. Most of my people died in a single day." Deho felt sick. "Your family, everyone I knew, everyone I loved." Nira's silver markings dimmed to almost nothing. "After that, the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to exist. The survivors were hunted down. Most were executed for war crimes. But you escaped. I was being transported to a prison ship when we were attacked by raiders. In the confusion, I got away." She shouldered her bag and checked her mysterious device. "I've been hiding ever since, moving from planet to planet using false identities. And you came to Earth. Earth doesn't ask many questions about exchange students. I thought I could hide here for a while, maybe find a way to disappear permanently." She looked at him with an expression full of regret. "I never meant for you to get involved." A new sound came from outside. Footsteps, multiple people moving with military precision. "They're here," Nira whispered. "Who?" "Hegemony survivors. They never stopped hunting us." She moved away from the window and positioned herself where she could see both the door and the window. "They want revenge for what we did during the war." Deho's mind was reeling. His quiet, shy roommate was a trained killer, a war criminal, someone who had fought in battles that destroyed worlds. But looking at her now, bleeding and afraid and trying to protect him, even though she could have just run, he realized something important. Whatever Nira had been during the war, she wasn't that person anymore. "What do we do?" he asked. Nira stared at him in shock. "We know I'm leaving. You're staying here and telling them you don't know anything about me. They'll kill you. Probably." She moved toward the door. "But that's not your problem." "Yes, it is. Why?" Nira turned back, her silver markings flaring with confusion and something that might have been hope. "I just told you I'm a war criminal. I've killed thousands of people. Why would you help me?" Deho thought about the past few months. About Nira fixing his laptop, making sure their door was always locked, standing between him and perceived threats. About her nightmares that she thought he couldn't hear, and the way she flinched at sudden noises. "Because," he said, "you're not that person anymore. And because you're my friend, Before Nira could respond, there was a loud bang on the door. "Nira Velthes," called a voice from outside. "We know you're in there. Come out peacefully and we won't hurt the human." Nira's silver markings blazed bright. She looked at Deho one more time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she moved toward the door, ready to surrender herself to save him. But Deho had other plans. "Wait," Deho said, grabbing Nira's arm before she could reach the door. "Let me go," she said, but there was no real force behind it. "This is the only way." "No, it's not." Deho pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. "Give me 2 minutes. Deho, you don't understand. These people won't just kill me. If they think you helped me, they'll kill you too. Then we better make sure they don't catch us." The banging on the door got louder. 30 seconds, Velthes." Deho hit send on his message and looked at Nira. "Do you trust me?" "That's not the point. Do you trust me?" Nira stared at him for a moment. Her silver markings pulsed with confusion and fear and something else. "Yes." "Good. Because my friend So-Min is a law student and she just sent an emergency message to Earth security claiming we're being attacked by unlawful bounty hunters." "What?" The sound of footsteps came from outside their window. Someone was climbing up to their second-floor room. "Earth has very strict laws about armed aliens on university campuses," Deho explained quickly. "Especially armed aliens who make threats against students. They'll be here in minutes," Nira said. "But these hunters will kill us before then." "Not if we're not here." Deho moved to his desk and started pulling out supplies. Wire batteries, chemicals from his xenobiology lab kit, spare electronics. Nira watched in amazement as he began connecting things together with quick, efficient movements. "What are you doing?" "Making a distraction." Deho held up a small device he had just assembled. "Smoke bomb. Chemistry class finally pays off. You're insane. So Min says that's my best quality." The window exploded inward as someone broke through. At the same moment, the door burst open. 3 figures in dark armor entered from both directions, weapons drawn. "Nobody move," shouted the one from the door. Deho activated his smoke bomb and threw it into the center of the room. Thick white smoke filled the air immediately. In the confusion, he grabbed Nira's hand. "Emergency exit," he whispered. They crawled toward the small emergency exit that led to the building's maintenance area. Deho had noticed it on his first day but never thought he would actually use it. The smoke was so thick that the hunters couldn't see them moving. Behind them, the hunters were shouting and coughing, trying to find them in the smoke. "Air vents," Nira said approvingly as they squeezed through the narrow opening. "Smart. I read a lot of action novels." They emerged in the building's basement maintenance room. Deho could hear alarms going off above them and the sound of running footsteps. Earth security was arriving. "This way," he said, leading Nira through the maze of pipes and machinery toward another exit. "How do you know about this place?" "I got lost during orientation and ended up down here. Took me an hour to find my way out." They reached a door that led to the campus steam tunnels. "I always wondered if I'd need to remember the route someday." They ran through the tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. But the tunnels were a maze, and Deho had spent enough time exploring them to know several routes. "Where are we going?" Nira asked as they ran. "To meet So-Min. She's waiting with a car. You planned this?" "No, I made it up as we went along. But So-Min is very smart. When I sent her that message, she knew what to do." They reached the tunnel exit near the university's east gate. Deho carefully opened the door and looked out. So-Min was waiting in her small car, engine running. "Coast is clear," he said. They ran to the car and jumped in. So-Min drove away immediately, but not too fast. Just a normal speed that wouldn't attract attention. "Are you both okay?" So-Min asked, looking at them in the rearview mirror. "Nira, you're bleeding." "It's not serious," Nira said. She was staring at both of them with an expression of complete bewilderment. "I don't understand. Why are you helping me?" "Because," So-Min said. Deho explained everything in his message. "You're a refugee, not a criminal." "I am a criminal. I killed—" "You were a soldier in a war," Deho interrupted. "There's a difference. The law doesn't see it that way. Earth law might," So-Min said. "I've been researching while you two were playing action heroes. Earth has very specific asylum laws for victims of genocide and planetary destruction." Nira's silver markings flickered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," So-Min continued, "that according to Earth law, what happened to your people qualifies as genocide. That makes you a refugee, not a war criminal. and we have legal protections for refugees. It's not that simple. Maybe not, Daeho said. But it's a start. And we have time to figure it out because Earth security is going to arrest those hunters for attacking a university dormitory with illegal weapons. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Nira spoke. You could have just let me go. It would have been safer for both of you. Probably, Daeho admitted. But that's not what friends do. Friends? Nira's voice was small and uncertain. You've been protecting me for months, Daeho said. Checking the locks, watching for threats, making sure I was safe. You think I didn't notice? That was just habit. No, it wasn't. You cared about my safety even though you barely knew me. Even though you had your own problems, Daeho leaned forward. That's what friends do. They protect each other. Nira was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. I haven't had friends in 20 years. Well, So-min said cheerfully, you have them now. And we're very stubborn about protecting our friends. Humans, Nira said, and for the first time since Daeho had known her, she almost smiled. You're all completely insane. We prefer creatively stubborn, Daeho said. This time Nira did smile. Just a little, but it was real. So, So-min said, what's the plan now? Daeho thought about it. First, we find somewhere safe to stay while the lawyers figure out the asylum process. Then we make sure those hunters can't find Nira again. And how do we do that? I have some ideas, Daeho said. But first I need to make some phone calls. I think it's time the whole galaxy learned what really happened to the Velthari people. Nira's silver markings pulsed with something that might have been hope. You really think this could work? She asked. I think, Daeho said, that humans are very good at protecting the people they care about, and we're even better at causing trouble for people who threaten our friends. For the first time in 20 years, Nira Velthes began to believe that she might actually have a future. The safe house turned out to be So-min's grandmother's apartment in the old part of Seoul. It was small but comfortable, and more importantly, it was off any official records that the hegemony hunters might be able to access. My grandmother is visiting my aunt in Busan for the month, So-min explained as they settled in. We can stay here while we figure things out. Daeho immediately got to work. He set up his laptop on the kitchen table and began making calls. His first call was to his professor, Dr. Lee, who taught xenopolitics and had contacts throughout the galactic academic community. Professor, I need a favor, Daeho said when Dr. Lee answered. It's about war crimes and refugee law. While Daeho talked to lawyers and professors and anyone else who might help, So-min worked on research. She had pulled up every law, treaty, and legal precedent she could find related to planetary genocide and refugee status. Nira sat quietly on the couch, still seeming stunned by everything that had happened. Her silver markings had dimmed to their normal level, but Daeho could see she was still tense and ready to run if necessary. I found something, So-min announced after an hour of searching, the Galactic Accords of 23A7. They specifically addressed the legal status of military personnel whose homeworlds were destroyed in retaliatory attacks. What do they say? Daeho asked. That soldiers who were following lawful orders during legitimate military operations cannot be prosecuted for war crimes if their entire civilization was subsequently destroyed as punishment for those operations. Nira looked up sharply. That's very specific. It was written after the Corvani incident, So-min explained. Similar situation to yours. A species fought back against invasion, won, and then had their homeworld destroyed in revenge. What happened to the Corvani survivors? They were granted refugee status and sanctuary on 12 different worlds. The ones who had committed actual war crimes were still prosecuted, but regular soldiers were protected. Daeho finished his call and joined the conversation. That's good news because I just talked to 3 different legal experts and they all think Nira's case qualifies for protection under Earth law. Really? Nira's silver markings flickered with cautious hope. Really? But there's a problem. The hegemony hunters aren't working through official legal channels. They're just going to keep coming after you regardless of what Earth law says. So what do we do about that? So-min asked. Daeho smiled. We do what humans do best. We cause problems for the bad guys. Over the next 6 hours, Daeho put together what he later called the most aggressively human plan in galactic history. It started with him posting Nira's story on every social media platform, academic forum and news site he could access. But he didn't just post the story. He posted it with evidence. Nira had kept records of everything: military orders, communications, tactical reports. She had documentation proving that she had followed legal orders during the war and that her people had been acting in self-defense. She also had evidence of the hegemony's retaliatory genocide. "Why did you keep all this?" Deho asked as he uploaded file after file. "Because I wanted someone to remember what really happened," Nira said quietly. "I thought someday I might find a way to tell the truth about my people." "Well," Somin said, "today is someday." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story was being shared across the galaxy. News organizations picked it up. Academic institutions began issuing statements. Most importantly, other survivors of planetary genocides started coming forward with their own stories. "Look at this," Somin said, reading news reports on her tablet. "The Corvani survivors are organizing protests on 6 worlds. The Altarian Refugee Council is calling for a review of all war crimes cases. 3 different universities are offering you full scholarships and research positions." But the most important response came from an unexpected source. "I just got a message from the Velthari Council in Exile," Nira said, staring at her device in shock. "There are other survivors?" Deho asked. "Apparently more than I thought. They've been hiding separately, but now they're organizing. They want to present a unified legal case to the Galactic Court." The hegemony hunters, meanwhile, found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. Earth security had arrested 3 of them for illegal weapons possession and assault. The galactic media was calling them genocide enforcers and terrorist hunters. Several worlds had issued statements condemning their activities. The final blow came when Dr. Lee, Deho's professor, managed to get the story to someone he knew at the Galactic Broadcasting Network. "They're doing a special investigation," Dr. Lee told them over a video call. "They want to interview Nira and document the evidence. This could change everything for all the Velthari survivors." "Is it safe?" Nira asked. "Safer than hiding forever," Deho said. "And besides, now you have bodyguards." "Bodyguards?" Somin grinned. "Earth assigned you a security detail. Apparently, threatening university students with illegal weapons is taken very seriously here." 3 days later, Nira stood in front of cameras from across the galaxy and told her story. She spoke calmly and clearly about the war, about her people's destruction, and about 20 years of hiding and running. "The Velthari were not perfect," she said. "We made mistakes during the war. Some of us did terrible things, but we were fighting for our survival, and we paid the ultimate price for that fight. The galaxy decided our entire species was too dangerous to exist, and they nearly succeeded in erasing us completely." "What do you want now?" asked the reporter. "I want the truth to be known. I want justice for my people, and I want the right to exist without fear." Nira looked directly into the camera. "I want other survivors to know they don't have to hide anymore." The interview was broadcast across hundreds of worlds. The response was overwhelming support for Nira and the other Velthari survivors. 6 months later, Nira received official refugee status on Earth. The Galactic Court agreed to review all war crimes cases involving planetary genocide survivors. The hegemony hunters were prosecuted for illegal bounty hunting and terrorism. More importantly, 47 other Velthari survivors came out of hiding and were granted sanctuary on various worlds. Deho and Nira were back in their dorm room, the same room where everything had started. Nira had new legal identity documents, a full scholarship to continue her studies, and a job consulting with Earth's Refugee Protection Services. "I still can't believe you did all that," Nira said as they studied together. She was taking real literature classes now, along with some courses in galactic law. "We did all that," Deho corrected. "Humans work better as a team. I've noticed that about your species. You're individually crazy, but collectively terrifying." "We prefer creatively persistent," Somin said from her spot at the table. She was helping Nira with her legal studies. Nira's silver markings shifted to a warm golden color, the Velthari equivalent of laughter. It was an expression Deho had never seen during her first months on Earth, but now it appeared regularly. "Can I ask you something?" Nira said to Deho. "Sure. Why did you really help me? When you found out what I was, you could have turned me in. You could have been safe." Deho thought about it for a moment. "Do you remember that first night when you fixed my laptop?" "Yes. You didn't have to do that. I was just some strange human you'd been assigned to live with. But you helped me anyway. He looked at her seriously. That's when I knew you weren't the dangerous person you thought you were. But I am dangerous. I was trained to kill. So are police officers and soldiers and lots of other people. That doesn't make them bad people. Deho smiled. You chose to use your skills to protect people instead of hurt them. You chose to fix things instead of break them. That's what matters. Nira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. 20 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my existence running and hiding and being afraid. And now I have friends. I have a home. I have a future. Her silver markings pulsed with contentment. I have hope. Good, Somin said. Because next semester we're all taking advanced galactic politics together. And I heard the professor is really tough. After everything we've been through, Deho said. I think we can handle one professor, Nira laughed, a real, genuine laugh that filled the room with warmth. Humans, she said fondly, you're absolutely impossible. We prefer creatively stubborn, Deho and Somin said together. Outside their window, the sun was setting over Seoul. In the distance, ships from dozens of different worlds could be seen coming and going from the spaceport. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of people who held grudges for decades. But it was also full of people who believed in second chances, who fought for justice and who refused to let their friends face danger alone. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything.